Hello, my name's AJ Goldsby. I'm a life master from Pensacola, Florida, and I'm coming to you today to bring you another one of my videos in my continuing series of videos on my Game of the Month website. The game for January 2013 is the incredible game between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura from the United States. This is from Wijk on Z, the 75th Tata Steel tournament, the Grand Prix section, Section A, the very top section. And of course, by now you've probably heard that Magnus Carlsen won this tournament going away, and he just simply played incredible chess. Let's go ahead and without any further ado just get to the game. Carlsen starts off e4. He's one of the few top GMs who still uses e4. Most of the other top GMs generally use d4 on their first move, but Carlsen is one of the few top GMs, other than maybe Anand, who still uses e4 on a regular basis. c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4. Now we have an open Sicilian, and if black wants to play like knight f6 and then d6, then we reach the main lines of the open Sicilian. Here, I think both Carlsen and Nakamura are doing just a little bit of sidestepping. In other words, basically Nakamura doesn't want to use the traditional move order, like maybe play a standard Sveshnikov because he's afraid of prepared analysis, and maybe he doesn't want to play a standard Schwenigan because he doesn't want to face the Kier's attack. So that's one of the things they're doing, is they're kind of playing around with their move order here. And I think the other thing that's going on is both sides are trying to get away from what they think their opponent has prepared. So there is a little bit of shadow boxing going on here. Black plays e5. Of course, this is an idea that originates with the Russians, primarily Boleslavsky. It's the pawn formation that we're about to achieve here is known as Boleslavsky's wall. Basically, before the early 1900s, say the 1930s, to give yourself a backward pawn in the Sicilian was considered to be tantamount to losing the game. In other words, if you gave yourself a backward pawn, you were just simply doomed, and no master worth his salt would even consider doing so. But basically what the Russians discovered was that, if you got a lot of piece play, it really didn't matter, if you did have the backward pawn, especially if your opponent wasn't set up in a situation or didn't have the kind of piece set up on the chessboard in order to exploit that. So basically, this is the Boleslavsky wall pawn formation. Andrew Soltis covers this in his excellent book, Pawn Structure Chess, which, by the way, I recommend to any player who's looking to improve his game if you can get a copy of it. It's not really easily obtainable, but if you can search for it under used books, and if you can get a copy, I highly recommend this book to any of the prospective young players out there who are looking to study maybe one of the best textbooks that I've ever read on pawn structure. Anyway, black, this is, of course, white can play knight b3 here. He can play knight b5, knight f5. All of these moves might be playable, but the knight b5 is the main line, and that's what Carlsen plays. And now black plays d6. And I believe now we have, black could have transposed by just playing a few knights out. We got all four knights out. We could have transposed in something called the Kalashnikov Sicilian. But, and we'll just very quickly look at that. The Kalashnikov Sicilian can be reached after this move order here. d6, bishop g5, a6, knight a3, b5. That's the Chelyabinsk variation, and now knight d5. That's pretty much the main line. And this is a very standard variation. You can find this in just about any good opening book like MCO. And also, too, if you want to see a very detailed analysis of these lines, please see my Game of the Month for April 2004. Anyways, let's just go back to the game real quick and review the opening. Just very quickly. Starts off e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, e5, knight b5, d6. And of course, now we've avoided, it's very similar to the Kalashnikov. Of course, we have the black has this gaping hole here at d5 and the backward d pawn. So we have this pawn structure with the backward d pawn, but the specific move order that black's chosen, and the fact that he's decided not to develop his king's knight to f6 early, means that instead of the Veshnikov, and Veshnikov is still possible by transposition here, but basically what we have now is something called the Kalashnikov or Kalashnikov Sicilian. It's I believe it's named after a rifle, not a chess player. But it's very similar. Probably the primary pioneer of these lines would be the grandmaster from Soviet Union, Eugeny Veshnikov. And he was the one that deeply explored these lines and basically showed how playable they were for black. But anyway, now we have the Kalashnikov, or Kalashnikov, as some people say, Sicilian. And it's a very sharp line. Basically, black has a lot of options. He can play f5, he can play his knight g to e7. In some lines, believe it or not, the knight even goes to h6. He retains the option of an early bishop e7, bishop g5 to get rid of his dark squared bishop, exchanging it off for white's good light squared bishop. And there's just a whole number of lines there. And now Magnus Carlsen, he plays g3. This is a fairly innocuous line, pretty much harmless. At least that's what the book that I have a couple of books on this particular branch of the Sicilian, and the book that I have says that this is a totally innocuous and harmless line, g3, and one book even gives it a pamphlet that I have on this opening, gives it a dubious. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I think g3 is as playable as anything else, and also too there's a little, like I said, both sides are shadow boxing, and I think both sides want to stay away from maybe what the other side prepared. Just very quickly, we'll look at what MCO and a lot of the other, the Power Book considers to be the main line here. The main line is 6c4, and now bishop e7, knight at 1 to c3, 7 a6, 8, knight a3, bishop e6, bishop e2. That's the most commonly played move here, as far as I can tell from the database. White can also try bishop d3, bishop g5, castles, bishop takes c1, rook takes c1, knight f6, knight c2, and black castles with an unclear position. And this is MCO 14, page 344, column number 1, and also no D. So, but anyway, backing up, knight a3, bishop e6, bishop e2. Again, we're looking at the main line rather than what was played in the game just briefly. Bishop g5, castles, bishop takes c1, rook takes c1, knight f6, knight c2. And white is just a little bit better here, marginally better. And if you want to see a good game that illustrates some of the ideas of this position, there's a good game in the database between GM David Navarra and Alexander Moisenko, and it's from the French Championship, top 12, Mulhouse, France, round 6.2, that was played in 2011. White won a very nice game. It was 1-0 in around 30-31 moves. But anyway, let's just back up to the game here. After d6, we have the Kalashnikov Sicilian, and now Carlsen plays this rather seemingly harmless move, g3, which again, I think that he had prepared it, deeply on his side of the board. And also too, I think he's trying to stay away from the main lines because perhaps he suspects that, Nakamura has studied these lines probably rather deeply, because Nakamura has turned into a very good chess player, and obviously he knows how to use a computer. So I think what Carlsen's trying to do here is avoid basically the brunt of Nakamura's preparation. And also too, I think he's prepared this line himself, and maybe too it's a bit of psychology here. Maybe the idea is trying to get Nakamura to say, hey, I'm playing a very harmless line, and maybe Nakamura lashes out and overreaches in the game. And that's exactly what happened in this contest. Now, I'm not sure if this was all deliberate preparation by Carlsen, or this is just simply the way the game worked out. But anyway, g3, it's a fairly basic idea. White's going to fianchetto his bishop, put some pressure on this backward pawn. The idea is trying to restrain black from being able to play the liberating advance later on of d6 to d5. So those are the main ideas there. And also too, white can play bishop g2 and castles, and he has a lot of nice extra space and a lot of open lines for his pieces. So I think those are pretty much the basic ideas of that line. Now, Nakamura plays h5, and I think that's true to his style, the way he plays chess, is to play a very testing and a very sharp line. He does that a lot, of course, in chess. This is not a new move. If you want to see a very famous move, a very well-known game in this, the encounter to study would be the Grandmaster game between John Nunn and Nigel Short from Hugoven Steel Tournament, Wijk on Z 1990. And White won a sharp game. It was 1-0 in around 33 moves. According to the power book gives this line as the main line here. Bishop e7, bishop g2, bishop e6, 8, knight at 1 to c3, a6, knight a3, knight f6, white castles, black castles, and white is slightly better, but the second player has a pretty good position here. I did search the database. There were no GM games that were really no games that are worth quoting. Certainly no GM games. In fact, I didn't find any games where both players were solid, players over 2,400. There was one game in there where one player was a 2,200, but I think the other player was just like a 1,600. So, no GM games in the position, but this is from the Power Book, which is fairly reliable. And I would say that it's, and the computer confirms that these are all good moves. And basically, white is maybe just a tiny bit better, but black, I think, has a fully playable position. We're going to go ahead and back up to the game here. Carlsen played g3, and that's when Nakamura chose this very sharp, very testing line of h5. And the ideas are pretty simple. If black's allowed to give a free hand, maybe black plays h5 and takes, and white, he gets a backward pawn here in the file because this rook will be hanging. Of course, after h here, bishop g2, so that's not necessarily true, but I think that's one of the ideas. And also, too, it's just the threat of the advance, and, basically keeps, white on his toes. Also, too, I think there are positional ideas here of bishop g4 and exchanging off the light squared bishops, which might be to, black's advantage here, seeing that white has weakened his light squares on the king side with a move like g3. So anyway, black plays h5. White just responds with real simple development, knight at 1 to c3. Now black just kicks back the dangerous knight. That knight on b5 is obviously very dangerous. The black queen can't go far. You can't play ideas like bishop e7 and bishop g5 because if bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, and then knight c7 check, forking king and rook. So the first thing black does is the first order of business for black is to kick back the dangerous knight on b5. And this is a standard idea in both lines of the Sveshnikov and the Kalashnikov Sicilian. a6, knight a3, 8, knight a3. Black plays b5. Of course, now there's a very simple threat of b5, b4, forking these two knights on the c3 and a3 squares. So here white plays knight d5, knight ge7, bishop g2, bishop g4. As stated earlier, this is a very aggressive way of playing, but I got to point out here that Fritz and Houdini and Rybka and Deep Shredder all confirm this, that Fritz finds a very good way for a very good alternative where black gets almost full equality right away, and that's after bishop g2, black should instead play knight takes d5 exclam. This is an improvement over the game, not the actual game, but a piece of analysis. And now e takes d5, knight e7, c3, bishop g4. And now all the engines agree that basically black has almost, if white has an advantage, it's only a few 1/100ths of a point, and it's basically, almost full equality for black. And black has absolutely no real problems here. And that's what all the engines agree was the best line. But anyway, going back to the game, white played knight at 7, knight at 1, 7, knight at 1, 7, knight at 1 to c3, a6, knight a3, b5, knight d5, knight ge7, bishop g2, and bishop g4. Again, I think the idea was, one of the ideas is black's trying to ask white to weaken himself with f3, and the idea being that that's going to make this bishop on g2 look a little bad. That's precisely, though, what white does because it gains time. Bishop e6, c3, this is a good move. Gains space and keeps this knight mainly off this d4 square. This black knight on c6 won't be allowed to come into white's knight's d4 square. h4, now that was not necessarily forced there. Black had a lot of different things he could just simply develop. One comical line that one of my students pointed out here was that he suggested at his club to play g7, g6, and of course white responds with knight f6 mate. That's almost too humorous, too funny, but it's certainly not a move that a grandmaster is going to play. Black plays h4. I think that's kind of a logical continuation of what he's trying to do there. White plays knight c2. This is just a common idea, and again, another very thematic type of motif for this type of opening. Many times this knight on a3 has basically done its job, and now it's really just sitting out here on the edge of the board doing nothing. So the first order of business for white is to get his knight back to the center of the board and get this piece playing. Knight c2, bishop takes d5. Now I think this is the very key position here. I think this is a key position. Don't think white's maybe a little bit better here, but black certainly has a fully playable position. And I think if you want to find the turning point in the game, maybe the first key point where Nakamura goes wrong, it would have to be right here. The correct line of play for black is h3. Bishop f1, bishop d7, knight c3, knight takes d5. Knight takes d5 if white has a small edge, but this is a very substantial improvement over the actual course of the chess game. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. Here, Nakamura decided to play bishop takes d5 here. And what that does is basically now he gives up the light squares. I think he was thinking that white's bishop is going to be bad. It's over here hiding behind two pawns, and it's just not going to be a good piece. But I think the bottom line here is that A, black loses time. His white plays pawn takes knight, and the knight's got to move again. And B, and the knight goes to a5. And now Nakamura plays Carlsen plays f4. And now, that was the most active continuation for white. Gains space, attacks the center, unleashes this king bishop over here. It was a very, very good move. And maybe Nakamura just underestimated, just how powerful this variation was going to be. Black plays very logically, knight f5. Now white plays g4 exclam. Kind of a risky move, but also a very sharp move. h3, bishop e4. Now here we have a second critical position. And I'll stop talking for just a minute. When I do, if you want to, you can analyze the game for you don't have to. But if you want to, you can analyze the game for just a minute or two and try to see if you can guess what what's black's next move, what black's 17th move should be. Okay, if you did like I asked and paused the video, then you tried to guess the next move, and the correct move here for black was queen h4 check. King f1, knight e7, queen e2. And although white has a little bit of an edge there, it's about 35/100ths of a pawn. It's a long, long way from being a forced win or anything even close to it for white. Black's actual move in the game was he played knight h4. You got to give that I gave it a dubious on my webpage, but it's either dubious or even just an outright question mark. But now black's that knight's going to be shutting off the edge of the board, and white's just much, much better. White simply castles here, just too easy a move now, and now the king's out of the center. There's no more danger, and basically not only does black have a bad game, white has the bishop pair, but it's really hard to find black's got to finish his development. I mean, we know that in the opening black has to develop his pieces, but the problem here, there's not a lot of easy moves for black, and in fact it's very hard to find a simple and logical plan of development where black doesn't wind up dropping a couple of pawns along the way. So black's position has already gone critical, and it may be there's no saving his game, although there is one more mistake in the game, and I do want to point that out as well. In this position, all the engines confirm that white is clearly better here. Black plays g6. That's going to make even more holes in his position, but black's got to do something with his dark squared bishop. Fritz instead prefers queen c8, but I'm not sure long term that's going to do black any good, because you get rid of the you're gonna have to do something with your dark squared bishop. But anyway, g6. Now Fritz says g5 is just very good for white, big advantage for white. Carlsen instead plays king h1. Oh yeah, and there was another reason that I wanted to analyze this game. In fact, there were several reasons. Number one, I have this Game of the Month website, and I've gotten away from it recently, but for a long time I always tried to pick one of the best top Grandmaster games that had been played in the last 20 or 30 days and put that on my Game of the Month website. Number two is on my Game of the Month website, when I was actively doing a game every month, I tried to feature a different opening all the time. In other words, I tried not to feature, like, say, a Rai Lopez over and over again, because that would get boring. So every month I'm looking for a slightly different opening. I want to try to feature an opening, a fighting game of high quality that features an opening that I haven't necessarily covered before. And I don't believe that I've ever used the Kalashnikov Sicilian as one of my main featured games in my Game of the Month website. And also, too, the other reason I wanted to feature this game was that Carlsen plays very strong chess, and I wanted to basically see if we can figure out how he wins. In fact, one of my students in South Florida, he was concerned that, Carlsen's found a way to cheat and use a computer, and he wanted me to look at this game with a microscope and basically say, is this engine play? And I think I can say almost definitively this is not. It's very good play by white, but it's not engine play, because there were several times when, absolutely positively all the engines agree that the best move was, whatever, and Carlsen doesn't make that move. And again, I won't, when I do a review of the game, a video of the game, I'm not looking to, do a deep analysis of the game. I'm going to post all my analysis on my webpage, and there will be a link to that just below the video. But basically, I'm just trying to do a commentary right now. But so another reason that I wanted to analyze this game was that, I think pretty much the analysis pretty much disproves any suspicions that anyone might have that Carlsen's found a way to cheat, or that he's playing chess via remote control and simply using an engine. I just don't think that's true. The analysis shows that not to be true. So that was another reason that I wanted to analyze this game. Finally, the last game reason I wanted to analyze this game was that a lot of pundits and various grandmasters and people, and there were a few videos, they looked at this game on the internet, and there was some analysis posted on the ChessBase website, and I felt like that they had just not done a real good job of analyzing this game, and so I wanted to take a look at it and see if I couldn't pinpoint a few more of the errors. I felt like that they kind of have glossed over some maybe possibly bad moves by Black. So I had a lot of different reasons for looking at this game, and also too, it's a great game of chess. I mean, I want to salute Carlsen and kind of show off Carlsen. He's won several tournaments in a row. He just recently broke Kasparov's record for the highest rated player ever, and now he's tied Kasparov's record for the best score ever at Wijk on Z. Or Wick on Z, however you want to say it. Also too, he with this game, he locked up. He had a absolute lock on first, even if he had lost in the last round, which he did not. I think he drew that game in the last round, but this game gave him basically a lock with a point and a half, and he still had a full round to spare. So this game, by winning this game, he gave him a lock on first place. So I thought there were a lot of reasons, good reasons, to look at this game, and maybe just try to take a good hard look at it, and let's figure out what was going on. But anyway, here we have G6, King H1. Again, several engines like the move G5 or F takes E5 even, depending on which engine you use. So, but Carlsen plays a nice move, King H1. That just puts his king safe. In fact, the fact that, the H and G files might open up after a few exchanges, the king will be safe over here in the corner. And also the fact that Black does not have a light squared bishop means that White's king is completely safe in the corner. That's kind of a common sense kind of play. Black plays bishop G7. That was clearly dubious. The main reason it's dubious is because Black had a much better move here. The absolutely correct move for Black was to play F5. That was just unbelievably, absolutely the best move for Black. F5 here would have given Black a very good game, but for whatever reason, I'm sure Nakamura must have seen that. I mean, he's just too good a player not to seen that. There had to be some reason why he didn't play that, but it was absolutely Black's best move. He has to fight for the center and also gain a little bit of space, and that game actually knocks off a big chunk of White's edge, maybe, which would be the reason had Black played F5, White 19 King H1 was not the most accurate move. But anyway, White plays 19 King H1, and Black plays Bishop G7, and of course 19 F5 was the correct move for Black. And now White plays F5. Again, another place where all the engines agree here that probably the strongest move for White was F takes E5, but Carlsen plays F5, so that's another confirmation that Carlsen wasn't playing chess with an engine somehow, using an engine, someone sending him the moves or something like that. So anyway, F5, but that's a very good move too. That's a very strong move. And in fact, if Black isn't careful, if he plays moves like Queen B6 and castles, then F6 kind of jams Black up real bad, and his bishop's got to go back in the corner, and it'll never see the light of day again. So F5 is a good move. It has some definite threats. Nakamura goes ahead and exchanges. G takes F5. Actually, the correct move, Rybka, Houdini, and Fritz and Schroeder all like bishop takes F5 here. And that's very good because, yeah, the exchanges occur anyway, but the big point is that, White gets rid of a possibly bad light squared bishop. So G takes F5 might have been not really the best line of play for White. Gives White a big edge, but the engine seemed to prefer bishop takes F5 instead. Knight G2. Now this was, here once more we have a key position. I didn't want to let you play the guess the move here because this video has already gone on quite a bit, a little bit longer than I had planned, and so I don't want it to run on too long. But here, basically, black's got a not too bad of a position, and rather than knight g2, I believe the correct move for black was, I don't even remember what the correct move for black was. I guess I'll have to fire up an engine here. Hang on just a second. Let's just fire up Fritz just very briefly and see what Fritz or Houdini. We'll use Fritz and see what Fritz says is best. Fritz likes bishop f6 here. Bishop f6 or bishop h6. Either one of those two moves should have given black an okay game. But just getting back here to the actual game. Okay, going back to the actual game here. After g takes f5, g takes f5, knight g2, that was a mistake. The correct move there was bishop to f6 or bishop to h6. Both Houdini and Fritz liked that move. Knight g2 was just a very, very bad move. Causes the engines lights to come on, all the engines, Houdini, Rybka, Fritz. The evaluations go way, way up for white. And basically from here on out, once this allows Carlsen to get a grip on the position, and once he gets a grip on the position, then the game seems to be pretty much over. f6, this is just crushing. That's a very nice move, but it's just crushing. Black plays bishop to f8. He can't capture here. Just quickly, we'll look at the capture line. Bishop takes f6. Bishop take queen f3. Rook h4. That move's obviously forced. Obviously, you can't play a move like, say, bishop back, queen takes that pawn f7 mate. So that's just too simple. Rook h4. Bishop g5, knight f4. Bishop takes h4. Bishop takes h4. Rook g1. King d7, knight d4. Queen f6. Knight e6. That's all computer analysis, and the computer says that white is winning easily there. So basically, it's pick your poison here. And I think at this point, Nakamura, I watched the game live on the internet, and you could watch Nakamura, and as the game went on, he seemed to become more and more pain. And I saw him, the live feed there when Carlsen played 22 f6, and literally you could see Nakamura grimace, almost like Carlsen reached across the board and just punched him right in the nose. I mean, he really looked like, ow, that hurt. And he thought quite a while on this move. So it's pretty much obvious at this point that white's a lot better. Bishop f8. Again, at this point, I think it's just a matter of how is black going to proceed from here. Queen f3, queen c7, knight b4, knight b7, knight c6. Now that knight, which had just a couple of moves before had been on a horrible square or not so great square on c2, suddenly finds itself a monster on c6. Black plays knight c5, and now just bishop f5. And now you got threats of, bishop takes pawn, and this knight here might find itself trapped, or black's shedding pawns. It's just really bad. Bishop f5 had been the best move here for a couple of moves, and according to the metal monsters, but all the engines seem to like bishop f5 for the last couple of moves for white. But after missing it for a couple of moves, Carlsen finally gets around to playing it, and now white just has an overwhelming game. Knight e7, bishop g5, rook g8, and now Carlsen's got a real simple idea. Just simply playing queen h5. Now there's the threat of queen h7. Black's and queen takes pawn. Black's just completely lost here. They play a few more moves. Knight b6, bishop e6, rook takes, queen takes, e takes. And this is just a horrible. This is totally, two connected passers. White can back up his queen, move his queen over, and play queen takes pawn. But the big thing is, well, there's a threat here of just f7 mate, and black can't castle because of this knight on c6. Obviously, if queen takes c6, then f7 mate. So at this point, Nakamura resigned, and that meant the game was pretty much over. And great game by Carlsen. Again, can't praise him enough. He just seems to be playing almost superhuman chess. Several of his games from Wijk on Z were just incredible. Against Lamy, he managed to take a seemingly innocuous and very routine opposite color bishop ending with rooks on the board and suddenly he turned it into an all near mating web, and black had to give up a lot of material. He's like one commentator said, he almost squeezed blood from the stone when he beat Karjakin from a seemingly drawn position, game that went nearly 100 moves. I could cite some other examples, but I mean, he just seemed to be playing machine-like chess. Just, you know, maybe not perfect, but very, very close to perfect, and totally mistake-free. Doesn't seem to have made any mistakes that I can detect in any of the games I've seen at any time. Anyway, this concludes my video on the game Carlsen Nakamura, Wijk on Z 2013. Thank you for watching my video. If you would like to make a contribution to my webpage and my video efforts, please go to the PayPal website. That's www.paypal.com, and make a donation there. And it's under my email. My email is LifeMasterAJ@yahoo.com. Thanks for watching my video, and I hope you have a great day.